Tom Brady was the number 2 quarterback in fantasy last year. Did he crack the top 5 in the rankings as of right now? We'll find out on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Yes, it is FFT in 5, and we have 5 quarterbacks to talk about. I'm Adam Azer with Dave Richard. We're looking at Dave's top 5 quarterbacks. Josh Allen is number 1 across the board. Give me 10 to 20 seconds on what could actually go wrong for Josh Allen if there's any hesitance to put him at number 1.
Well, he could always get hurt. We could say that about every player. He could run a lot less. That could be something that makes some sense for Buffalo. They don't want to get their franchise quarterback all banged up. Maybe he only runs for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. And maybe it's just a bad luck year for passing. Gabe Davis doesn't come through, and he doesn't finish as a top 3 fantasy quarterback.
All right, let's go to number 2.
Doesn't sound realistic, does it?
No, I'm going to take the field, not Josh Allen, to finish number 1, but I understand why, right? You would too?
Depends on the odds.
Even money, even odds. Josh Allen.
No, of course I'm taking the field.
Yeah, of course. Right. He's not.
Your sports book is weird.
He's not a cut above everyone else. He's number 1. It makes sense. He's been number 1 2 years in a row. So, but number 2 is not Patrick Mahomes. For you and for Jamie and for Heath, it's Herbert and then Mahomes. So 1, 2, 3 is Allen, Herbert, Mahomes. Talk about how you made that decision, Herbert over Mahomes.
One of these guys lost Tyreek Hill. It's really that simple. And Herbert had the quietest 5,000-yard passing season I've ever experienced in my life. Just no one's talking about it. He does a decent job running the ball, 38 touchdowns last year. I think he could go toe-to-toe with Mahomes this year in terms of yards and touchdowns.
So you have Mahomes 3. Was that a difficult call for you to put him even that high? We cannot say, well, here's what Mahomes has done in the past without Tyreek Hill. There hasn't been much of that. Although he was good a few years ago when Tyreek Hill got hurt. But was that tough for you to put him 3?
No, because once Tyreek Hill was out the door and I got comfortable with the realization that this Chiefs offense will operate a little differently than how they have in the past, and they don't have this total game breaker in Tyreek Hill on the field, it made me more comfortable. Also, I think the Chargers schedule, believe it or not, I think it's easier for Herbert than the Chiefs schedule will be for Mahomes. But I still think Mahomes, look, he's a great passer. He's still going to be able to read defenses. He's got enough speed on the field to chuck it long and make some big gains, whether it is MVS or Sky Moore or not Juju Smith-Schuster. He's not very fast. But he's got enough contributors to where his numbers should still be good. I just don't think he's got the same type of upside when he doesn't have Tyreek Hill, that reliable downfield threat and short area threat. He was good in that role too.
Number 4 is Lamar Jackson, who it's tough to look at him per game last year because if you take away the one game where he barely played, it's a lot different. In fact, he was a top 5 quarterback without that game. So that was kind of encouraging because he didn't have a great season last year, but he was top 5 per game if you take away that one game where he only threw, I think, 5 passes. But, obviously he hasn't really been able to repeat what he did 2 years ago and he loses, or 3 years ago when he loses Marquise Brown. So talk about Lamar Jackson at 4.
I think it's a bit of a hedge. I think if I really wanted to be aggressive, I would put Lamar Jackson ahead of Patrick Mahomes. You saw what he did in those first 7 games last year. You talked about it, 25.4 fantasy points per game. And a lot of that did have to do with Marquise Brown coming through for him, and then just things fell out in Baltimore. They're talking about it being more like 2019. Lamar was pretty awesome in 2019. Yeah. The downside is we've seen it. He's not a great passer. Defenses started to come up with a consensus way of playing against him in the middle of last season. It worked. Do they have a counterpunch to that doesn't involve running the football? Do they have enough in the passing game after Mark Andrews to really threaten defenses? I'm not so sure. There's plenty of upside. He could be the QB1, but I'm gonna lean a little bit away from that. I think if you get him after round 5, you're doing good.
Okay, and last one, we about a minute left here. Tom Brady is number 5 for you. You are the only one who has Tom Brady in his top 5, although Heath has Tom Brady 6th. I will just say, just to be, difficult, Dave.
Sure, go ahead.
A little worried about him this year just because there's just, Godwin's coming back from the ACL. There's not obviously the same depth at the receiver. No Bruce Arians. Lose 2 starters on the offensive line. Obviously, he doesn't run. I'm not worried about his skill at all. I'm worried about his situation for Brady.
The situation gets worse if Gronk doesn't play. I'm ranking Gronk as if he's going to play. I think he's good for Brady. In fact, I think Brady has 40 touchdown upside if he has Evans, Godwin, and Gronk. It sounds like Godwin will be there for the majority of the season. It's starting to get a little harder to buy into Chris Godwin coming all the way back on such a short timetable from the ACL injury. So I get where you're coming from. A little bit of this is trusting Byron Leftwich to – I'm going to trust Byron Leftwich to trust Tom Brady. And I think Tom's going to be the one to call the plays. I think Tom's going to be good with throwing the ball quite a bit. I think they really like what they've got in Russell Gage. I think he's good insurance for them at wide receiver. Not sure if he's going to be great for fantasy, but someone who can help contribute and pad those stats. Obviously, if Godwin's not going to be around for the start of the season and Gronk's out, Brady will tumble. But I've bet against Brady before and lost. I've bet with Brady before and won. I feel like just the safe thing to do is just wait for Brady to fall into your lap in round 7, and you take him to be your number 1 quarterback.
All right. And that is the top 5 for Dave Richard on the full-length show. On Tuesday, we're going to have Jamie and Heath debate their top 5 quarterbacks. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy